Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I didn't mean for him to see me like that. The bathroom door creaked open just as the towel slipped from my hand. I froze. My back was still damp from the shower, my hair clinging to my neck, and yet I stood there, fully dressed beneath the towel, watching the man I called my husband fall to his knees, silent and wide-eyed. But it wasn't lust in his stare. It was something else. Something deeper. Sadder. Maybe guilt. Maybe regret. Or something worse, recognition. My name is Arya. I've been married to Mason for 6 years. We were that picture-perfect couple at first, matching pajamas, homemade dinners, inside jokes that made people jealous. But now, I swear some mornings I wake up next to a stranger. He still makes my coffee. Still kisses me goodnight. Still says, I love you. But there's a pause now, right before each of those things. A hesitation I didn't notice before. As if he's rehearsing lines to a play he's no longer passionate about. That night, the towel moment, it wasn't about modesty. I'd already put my dress on in the bedroom. I wrapped the towel around me only because I didn't want to face Mason yet. We hadn't spoken about what I found in his car, lipstick. Not my shade. Not mine at all. It was tucked between receipts and empty gum wrappers. As if it belonged there. And now here he was, kneeling, eyes scanning me like he was searching for something. An answer? A sign? I didn't speak. I couldn't. My voice felt trapped in my chest, heavy with words I was too afraid to say. Why are you looking at me like that? I whispered finally, my throat dry. He didn't answer. Just reached for the hem of my dress, fingers trembling. I stepped back. He lowered his hand. And for a split second, I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, like he knew this wasn't just about a towel. Or a dress. This was about all the words we stopped saying, all the quiet nights, all the unasked questions between us. Somewhere deep down, I still wanted to believe in us. But part of me also knew, this moment was the beginning of something unraveling. And just when I thought the silence between us couldn't get louder, Mason looked up and whispered 4 words that changed everything. That's not your dress. That's not your dress. His voice cracked around those words, like they were too sharp to hold in his mouth. I blinked, suddenly aware of how loud my heartbeat had become. The room felt smaller. Tighter. As if his confession was pulling the air right out of it. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew. He didn't answer. Just stared at the fabric with a haunted sort of curiosity, like it didn't belong here, or with me. I looked down too, and for the first time since slipping it on, I wondered if it really was mine. The dress had been in our closet, tucked behind the winter coats. Simple. Ivory. Barely worn. But not familiar. My skin prickled with unease. Mason stood slowly, and something in his eyes shifted. Not anger. Not even fear. Just distance. That quiet kind of heartbreak you don't shout about, just carry around like an old wound. You wore that on our honeymoon, he said softly. In Italy. I tried to remember. Tried to pull that moment out of the blur of old laughter and Polaroids. But I couldn't. Because I didn't wear this then. Someone else did. Someone he took with him. My hands clenched at my sides, but I didn't say what I was thinking. I watched him instead. The way he ran a hand through his hair. The way his jaw twitched like he was fighting the urge to speak. Or scream. Or lie. We used to undress each other with laughter. Now, it felt like every layer of truth was another piece of clothing we'd forgotten how to take off. You remember things so clearly, I said, carefully. You forget things so easily, he replied. That hit harder than I expected. There was silence after that. Not a comfortable one. A tense, fraying silence full of questions we were both too tired, or too scared, to ask. But still, something pulsed between us. Desire maybe. Or nostalgia. The kind of longing that comes from missing someone who's still right in front of you. I caught his gaze, and for a heartbeat, it felt like we were both reaching across some invisible line neither of us wanted to cross. But then he turned his back. And I stood there, in someone else's dress, wondering just how much of my marriage belonged to someone else too. Arya sat on the edge of their bed long after Mason had gone quiet. The silence between them wasn't peaceful, it was sharp, almost surgical. Every breath, every rustle of fabric sounded louder in the space they used to fill with laughter and soft touches. She reached behind her neck and unzipped the ivory dress. It slid down her arms with a whisper, pooling at her waist before she pushed it aside like a memory she didn't ask for. Beneath it, she wore one of Mason's old t-shirts. Soft. Familiar. It still smelled faintly of his cologne. But even that comfort felt borrowed now. Mason stood by the window, one hand gripping the curtain, the other clenched into a loose fist by his side. "You always told me I could be honest with you," he said without turning around. "And you always said you had nothing to hide," she replied, her voice steady, too tired for drama. A beat passed. Then two. "You've been distracted," she continued. "Late meetings. That perfume on your coat. You kiss me like I'm not really there." His shoulders tensed, but he didn't deny any of it. "I've never touched anyone," he finally said. "Not the way I touch you." Arya looked down. "You don't touch me anymore." The silence stretched again. And this time, it felt like an answer. She stood and walked over to the dresser, pulling open the top drawer, not to find anything, but because she needed something to do with her hands. Inside was her journal. Underneath it, a gold bracelet. Delicate. Feminine. Definitely not hers. It was the final crack. Not enough to break things entirely, but enough to let doubt bleed in. She didn't speak about it. Just closed the drawer gently. Across the room, Mason finally turned. His eyes softened as they met hers, something between apology and fear. She saw the weight he carried. The ache of a man who'd made mistakes he hadn't fully confessed. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice low. His jaw moved, but no words came. She took a step forward. "Is she someone from work? Someone who wears lipstick I've never bought and dresses I never wore?" "No," he said too quickly. She stepped closer. "Then why do I see her in your eyes every time you look at me?" That landed. He inhaled sharply, as if her words had punched a hole in him. But before he could speak, a knock came at the door downstairs. Soft. 2 short taps. Then silence. Mason's eyes flicked toward the hall. Arya turned toward the sound too, chilled, confused. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked, throat tight. He shook his head slowly. "No." The knock came again. And this time, it sounded like the past, demanding to be let in. The knock echoed again, this time, a little firmer. Arya didn't move. Neither did Mason. The hallway beyond their bedroom stretched like a thread pulled tight, and both of them stood at either end of it, hearts in their throats, unwilling to tug harder. "Mason," Arya's voice was barely a whisper. It trembled, fragile and breathless, like something sacred was about to shatter. He didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her, like he hadn't in months. Not since that trip to Charleston, when they'd danced barefoot on the beach and she'd fallen asleep to the sound of his heartbeat. That version of them felt so far away now. "I never meant to lose us," he said finally, stepping toward her. Arya's eyes filled with tears, not from what he said, but how he said it. Like he was already mourning what hadn't fully ended. Like he was standing inside the wreckage of something still burning. You didn't lose us, she whispered. You just stopped choosing me. She didn't mean for the words to cut as deeply as they did, but she saw the way he flinched. He came closer, slowly, like approaching a fragile thing he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch anymore. His hand reached for hers, but stopped just short. Hovering. Hesitating. I still want you, he said. Every night. Every morning. Even when I'm tired. Even when I'm lost. Aria's breath hitched. Her heart surged forward, desperate to believe him, but something inside her held back. That bracelet. That dress. The lipstick. The silences. Then why does it feel like someone else already has you? She asked, voice cracking under the weight of longing and betrayal. Their eyes locked. Neither moved. The air between them pulsed with everything they weren't saying. His fingers brushed against hers, finally making contact. A simple touch, but it felt electric, dangerous, alive. They were a breath away from collapsing into each other. From kissing like people who missed each other more than they could admit. From choosing love over pride. Then the knock came again. Louder. Insistent. And just like that, the moment broke. Mason stepped back. And Arya? She turned toward the door. The hallway light flickered as Arya stepped toward the door, her bare feet brushing against the cool wooden floor. Mason stayed behind, his breath heavy, lips slightly parted as if he wanted to stop her but couldn't find the right words fast enough. Her hand hesitated on the doorknob. The final boundary between suspicion and truth. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there was Elena. Long, honey blonde hair tucked behind one ear, lips painted a muted rose. She wore a coat over silk nightwear, as if she'd come from somewhere she shouldn't have been, or hadn't intended to be seen. She didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just looked Arya square in the eyes, cool and composed, like a woman who knew exactly what room she was standing outside of. Elena? Arya's voice was thin, fragile. Why are you here? Mason appeared behind her now, stiff, frozen. His eyes widened when he saw Elena. Not surprised, but startled. As if he hadn't expected her to come here. That was enough. I left something, Elena said calmly, eyes darting past Arya for just a second. Thought it was best I retrieve it myself. Arya's stomach twisted. She stepped fully into the hallway, closing the door slightly behind her to shield what little intimacy still clung to that room. I don't understand, she said, although her body already did. Every nerve in her arms, every pulse in her chest, already screamed the answer. Elena sighed softly. It's not what you think. But Arya wasn't sure what she thought anymore. The dress. The bracelet. The glances Mason couldn't explain. And now Elena, at this hour, with that voice. She turned slowly to Mason. Is this her? His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. He didn't answer. That was an answer. I didn't know, Arya said softly, backing away. I thought maybe you were pulling away because you were hurting. Lost. But you weren't lost. You were with her. No, Mason finally said, stepping forward. It wasn't like that. I swear to you, nothing happened. But Elena tilted her head slightly, just enough to plant doubt. I told him not to tell you, she said quietly. It was complicated. It still is. The hallway spun. Arya leaned against the wall, her body trembling not with rage, but something colder, grief mixed with a sick kind of understanding. She looked back at Mason, her voice barely audible. Was I the only one who didn't know? He stepped closer again, this time touching her arm. She didn't pull away. But she didn't lean in either. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky, echoing the truth they'd all avoided too long. And in the dim hallway light, three hearts stood suspended between choices. The silence after Elena's words was unbearable. Aria's heart thundered against her ribs, every memory flashing like a strobe light, every kiss, every late-night whisper, every moment Mason had looked through her instead of at her. "I need the truth," Aria said, her voice steady but hollow. "All of it. Right now." Mason stepped fully into the hallway, his eyes brimming with regret. "There was a night," he said, slowly, "months ago. After you and I had that fight, about the future. The baby talk." His voice faltered. "I didn't cheat. But I didn't stop something from starting." Aria's chest caved inward, like she'd been holding her breath for months. "You let her in." "I didn't love her," he said quickly. "I was lost. I was scared of what we were becoming. And she was just a distraction from everything I didn't know how to fix." Elena looked away now, her facade breaking. "He talked about you," she said, her voice soft and almost apologetic. "Even when he didn't realize he was. I never stood a chance." The air changed then. Something shifted, not forgiveness, not yet. But clarity. Aria looked between them. "I wasn't perfect either," she whispered. "I shut down. I stopped being vulnerable with you because I thought strength meant silence." Mason stepped forward. "So where does that leave us?" Tears welled in Aria's eyes. "Broken," she said. "But not beyond repair." Then, just as the tension started to release, Elena reached into her coat pocket and held out a folded piece of paper. Aria hesitated, then took it. It was a photograph. Mason, Aria, and Elena. But not from this week. Not recent. The edges were worn. The three of them stood at a college house party. Smiling. Drunk on youth. Aria in the center. "I knew you before either of you did," Elena said quietly. "Before you ever kissed. Before you ever chose each other." Aria's eyes widened. "You." Elena gave a sad smile. "I loved you both once. Just in different ways." That moment was the twist of the knife and the healing of the wound all at once. Three hearts, intertwined longer than any of them realized. And for the first time in months, Aria stepped toward Mason, not to fall into his arms, but to decide if she still belonged there. The photographs sat on the kitchen table between them like a time capsule. Aria traced the faded edges with her fingers while Mason sat quietly across from her. Elena had left hours ago, her presence a ghost now, but her impact permanent. The morning sun crept through the window, bathing everything in soft gold. The kind of light that makes even broken things look whole. Aria finally spoke. "You know what hurts most? It's not the almost affair. Not even the lies. It's how easy it was for us to stop being us." Mason looked up, his eyes swollen with the ache of truth. "I know. I keep asking myself when I stopped choosing you, and why I thought I'd get another chance to fix it later." She exhaled slowly. "We let the silence grow roots. Filled the space between us with distractions instead of honesty." "I never stopped loving you, Aria," he said. "Even when I lost you in the noise of our lives." Aria looked at him, eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "Love isn't the question anymore. Love was never the problem. It's loyalty. It's showing up. Even when it's hard." There was a long pause. Then she stood and walked around the table, sitting beside him instead of across from him. She didn't touch him. Just sat close. That was enough, for now. "I don't hate you," she whispered. Mason turned to her. "What do we do now?" Aria smiled, faint but real. "We clean up the mess. Slowly. If we still want this, we work for it. If we don't, we let each other go with grace." He nodded, barely able to speak. As the morning bloomed around them, the weight lifted, just a little. Not because everything was healed, but because truth had finally been spoken. Sometimes, that's where love starts again. Later, Arya stood at the window, watching the street as people walked by, lives unfolding in silence. She thought of Elena, of what had been buried for years. Of the mistakes and the almosts. And she knew something now she hadn't before: the heart breaks in many ways, but it also remembers how to forgive. 1.